take a quick time out, and Miles Kristen is going to be on hand with his reporting on the situation in Wisconsin. Riots, ouch, not good. Anyway, he's going to give us a bird's eye view of the ongoing problems there after this. Don't go away.
Stream us live at saga960am.ca.
You were listening to the Marc Patrone radio program. If you'd like to call, here's the number. 416-640-0200. That's 416-640-0200. The Marc Patrone radio program, heard exclusively on News Talk, Saga 960.
Well, another video has emerged, another shooting of a black man, this one in Kenosha, Wisconsin. This is an individual who apparently was shot in the back, seriously wounded by a police officer at close range. Captured on video, and guess what? We're seeing rioting, looting once again, and apparently this guy had a long history, multiple warrants, history of gun violence with police. So this guy had a long history of confrontations with police officers, but naturally the left is going to play down that factor behind all of this. I believe we got Miles Kristen on the line. He's coming to us from near Madison, Wisconsin. Miles, what's the situation in Wisconsin right now?
Well, I saw the Kenosha was trending last night, which is, kind of out of the ordinary. So I found the story and saw the footage. And, there's no reason why if somebody's walking away from the police and you've got multiple police officers, I get that the moment he enters the car, the police are even in a more frightened state. But the thing is, the man's, walking away slowly enough. There's no reason why the police couldn't have put their gun in their holster and tackled the man to the ground if they felt that that was necessary. I mean, by letting him even get up to the car door, the situation got more intense, I guess. And, Kenosha has a long history of very questionable shootings. I mean, there was a case, must have been more than 15 years ago, called the Michael Bell case, where, this young man was shot, and parents ended up suing and, receiving a very large settlement. And I want to say they took a lot of that money, and they've been running billboard campaigns for, over 10 years now, showing the footage and so forth. And there's a lot of questions about the district attorney, a former district attorney who then went on to be the chief of staff for one of the top Democratic assemblymen in the state. And the whole situation in Kenosha has been very bad for many years.
Do we know this guy was this guy armed? I mean, my understanding is I'm hearing that he was, but it's not like he was an unarmed person. The George Floyd situation was different, right? Because he was already on the ground. He was in handcuffs.
This man had, nothing in his hands. He's seen on one side of a van walking around, and then he walks up to the door of his car, and then he opens the door, and that's when the police shot him in the back. We're talking 7 times. The last I heard, the man was still alive, but, it's a very critical condition, so I don't know if he's actually going to make it through and everything. But it's just like, you got tasers, you got pepper spray, you got your baton. Even if there's danger, even if somebody is potentially going for a weapon, there's so many things that police can do to stop it from getting to that level. Because now it's like, okay, police are afraid of the possibility of a gun. They shoot somebody dies. Then you end up with riots and protests and riots, which then create other situations where, how many people in the United States have died as a result of the George Floyd protests and riots. And I remember talking, we talked about the former police officer at the pawn shop who got murdered. We've talked about there's been protesters who have died. There have been citizens who have died. I mean, these situations are creating worse situations in an already nationally tense situation. I mean, I get that police are afraid, and at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of things police can do to stop it from getting to this point.
Well, but they're also on edge, too. I mean, you've kind of touched on that a little bit, right? They're on edge because they don't know. Officers have been hurt, right? They're getting bricks in the face. Some of them are getting shot. Like
somebody threw a Molotov cocktail at the scene of this crime, or whatever you want to call it, the scene of this shooting yesterday when police closed off the area. Later that night, somebody threw some sort of Molotov cocktail or an incendiary device, or whatever you want to call it, at the police. And so, I mean, I bet it's just...
I don't know. I'd be pretty tense, too, if I was a police officer in Kenosha and any number of cities.
So, I mean, we have to maybe also look at some of the bigger questions, like, you'd say economic policies, and some socialist is going to go, well, we need free this and free that. It's like, no, maybe we need to cut taxes on all poor and middle-class people. Maybe we need to help create better jobs. Maybe the war on drugs has a huge factor in a lot of these situations. Maybe we're fighting an unwinnable war against substances that cause us to be in these situations in the first place.
How much of these Antifa-related violent incidents is funded, is backed by who knows what? Maybe the Democrat Party of Joe Biden, maybe members of the left, the organized left in the United States.
As soon as something like this happens in Kenosha, I imagine you probably have some of your Chicago Antifa types that fly up there drive up there as quickly as possible. Chicago's only like an hour drive from there. How do I say this in a delicate way? There's that debate about Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. I don't really feel like those people chanting All Lives Matter are really also talking about police instances where white people are shot as well. Black people and white people are also shot by the police in situations where it probably wasn't necessary. I can think back to the situation of the man who was the white man who was forced to crawl on his hands and knees in a hotel and then was shot multiple times with a AR-15 by a police officer, and the police officer gets let off scot-free. There was a situation here in Madison a couple years ago where a man had a small garden tool in his hand, and the police shot him dead, and protesters showed up on the scene. And when the police eventually came out and say it was a Caucasian male, all the protesters left, all the media left. There was no attention put on that. Great attention put on the Tony Robinson case here in the Madison area. And when they found out that it was a white guy who got shot, everybody bailed. Nobody ever talked about the shooting of, I believe his name was Schumacher, ever again. It just completely ignored. And so we should be paying attention to situations, these questionable situations, regardless of race or color. If somebody is shot by the police and it wasn't necessary, we should be concerned about that no matter what they look like, All
right, and all this is happening under the cloud, I guess, of a federal election, national election, which is coming up in 70 days' time, something like that. And so we're creeping ever closer to that day. You've got these riots going on. You've got violence in the streets. You've got COVID. And you've got, on the other side, hopes of an economic recovery, even as the left pushes for another lockdown, because they need a devastated U.S. economy in order to paint Donald Trump as a failure. And so you've got these warring narratives. And, of course, you've got the media very much in the pocket of the left. And on the other side, you've got a handful of media, like maybe Fox and the Rush Limbaughs of the world, saying, well, wait a minute, Trump has done a pretty good job on the economy. If it wasn't for COVID, then, our economy, at least the one in the United States, would be going full bore, having brought on the lowest level of unemployment amongst blacks and Latinos in the history of your country. And so you've got these warring narratives. And, that election day creeping ever closer, as well as the ongoing violence. How do you see all this coming together on Election Day?
Sure. So Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have basically no ability to gather the protesters that are out there, and that's potentially millions of voters. Bernie Sanders could have caught a lot of those voters, right? At the same time, Bernie Sanders would have lost out on your blue dog Democrats, or the kind of Democrats who are successful and have their money. And they just, I know people who are hardcore Democrats, they could have never voted for Bernie Sanders because of how much money they would lose under someone like that. The economic factors to a lot of this do play a big part. And if, looking back at that Democratic convention that was last week, you can see that a big push by Joe Biden is to try to get former Republicans, or try to get Republicans. They had Kasich and Bobby Jindal and Colin Powell, and that's going to lose even more of the progressive type. So that really is the Democrat strategy, is try to get Republicans who voted for Trump, and they really don't care about the protesters and the progressives and all that. And, someone like Tulsi Gabbard probably could have done that middle ground of getting both. And I watch all these Trump attack ads on Joe Biden, and they're really actually pretty accurate. They're just things that Biden has actually said, or Biden's history. They don't even have to really make stuff up about Biden. The question is, Trump has made mistakes, and Trump has upset a lot of Republicans. And, he lost the popular vote last time. And so looking at the Electoral College, it really comes down to, I'd say, Pennsylvania and Florida, because both of those states, I want to say, are 20 or over 20 electoral votes. Wisconsin and Michigan, those are both like about 8 or 9. And there's, really comes down to about 5 states in the whole country that could go either way. And the last time around, Trump won all of these swing states, especially in the Midwest. But if Joe Biden were to win Texas somehow, which is nearly impossible, he wins. If he only won Florida and Pennsylvania versus the 2016 map, it comes pretty darn close if he doesn't win that over. I mean, basically, if he wins Pennsylvania, Florida, and one more of the states that Trump had, he wins the presidency. On the other hand, Trump is extremely competitive in Minnesota and in New Hampshire, states that went with Clinton last time around. So who's to say that Trump won't flip some states that went Democrat last time around? I mean, that's possible. Nobody has flipped Minnesota blue since Nixon. But he was percentage points away from doing that. In fact, I mean, if you go back, and a lot of people in Minnesota, I mean, he has campaigned in Minnesota. It's possible. He was this close to flipping Illinois, for crying out loud. It wasn't that far off. Anyway, go ahead. Oh, no. I mean, and I think it's funny that they keep talking about Pennsylvania, like Joe Biden's from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Joe Biden, Pennsylvania. It's like Joe Biden was the senator from Delaware. Like his connection to Pennsylvania is like, me talking about the middle-class town I lived in 30 years ago, And if he's going to get rid of fracking, which he's promising to do, then that will devastate all those areas in Pennsylvania where fracking is a big deal. And so, and as it is in other states, like Ohio, for instance, another key battleground state. Anyway, Miles, thank you so much. Can you come back later this week? Yes, absolutely. Fantastic. Miles Kristen coming to us from just outside Madison, Wisconsin. And we're going to be back with our final scintillating segment on the Marc Patrone radio program right here on Saga 960 after this.
Stream us live at saga960am.ca.